Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast, where you get to learn everything you want to know about addiction and recovery. I'm your host, Angela Pugh, co-founder of Kansas City Recovery, life coach, and recovering alcoholic. To learn more about me, you can listen to episode 0 on your podcast app or find us on the web at addictionunlimited.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Angela Pugh. Thank you as usual for spending some time with me today and listening to the pod. I appreciate you guys. I think you're going to love this show. This has a really interesting twist today. We're going to talk about some extreme sort of athleticism and kind of how it makes sense and how it relates to addiction. I'm going to connect those things in some weird way that I think you guys will appreciate. But let's welcome Joe D to the show. Hi, Joe. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're recording in Tampa today. So tell the listeners a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, all that good stuff.
Okay. Well, I was in the military for almost a decade, and then kind of going along, which we'll get into later, but I taught survival for the Air Force for 8 years. And then after I got out, I moved to from Georgia to Tampa, and so I've been here for a few years. And while I was in the military, that's when I kind of started getting into ultramarathon running, which kind of helped me get like a focus after I left the service, because I was doing something that was so out there while I was active duty that when I got out, I kind of missed it. So I found like this niche sport kind of through like friends and then just reading magazines and whatnot, and was like, it was something I wanted to do. And it's kind of just helped me maintain like my lifestyle now.
Yeah. When you started ultramarathons, were you already sober?
No. I did, I think 5 or 6 before I was even like remotely stopped drinking at all. Like there was races I did. I think not my first attempt, my first finish for 100 miles, I think it was right after Christmas. And so I drank like the entire holiday season leading up to that race.
Can you tell a difference now that you're sober? Like physically, mentally, like all of it? Can you tell a difference?
Yes. The one thing that I noticed, and it's kind of weird, is I noticed that like a lot of like my like memories from when I was younger and like just kind of like overall clarity's more there. And then I'm much more consistent on my training schedule, let's put it that way.
It is easier to be consistent when you're not hungover.
Yes. Yeah. That's one of the other things. And then I just have more time for other stuff too. You know, when I was drinking and racing at the same time, I didn't, you know, it was like a primary focus, but like now I can do all my schoolwork easier and like all kinds of stuff and kind of maintain the whole schedule a lot easier.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking that, which is why I asked if you were already sober when you started doing it, because I was thinking like I couldn't follow through on anything when I was drinking. You know what I mean? Like literally, I had 2 phases of life. I was drunk or I was hungover. Like that was pretty much the extent of it. So to plan even the training, because your training cannot be easy.
It's not. And
like there's no way I would have ever been able to like get up and go train, like run, practice run, whatever you call it, like however you do it. There's no way I would have been able to put that together.
There was, I mean, like I said, when I was first doing it, a lot of days I did miss, like a lot of the weekends where you're supposed to get up early and run 3 to 4 hours or something, like I would get up and be hungover and like maybe do like an hour's worth or something like that. So my first attempt at 100 miles actually ended pretty poorly. And a lot of it was due to the fact I just didn't simply train for it. Like I kind of gutted my way through the 31-mile race and then the same with the 50-mile race. And I wanted to make a shot at 100 and I didn't make it. I dropped at like 42 miles or something like that. Just was physically just destroyed like from not training enough. And then that was like one of my first like kind of wake up calls where I was like, you know, I got to slow down. So I kind of eased off the drinking, and then I ran 100K to kind of like do a shorter race. And so that one was 62 miles. I finished that one, but then it like gave me the confidence again. So I started like going back into partying and whatnot. And somehow, I don't even know how I did it. I did finish that one the following year with a fairly relaxed training schedule.
Yeah.
So
what, like, how old were you when you first thought you had a drinking problem, or you might have a drinking problem?
I would think back to, like, now it's a little more clear. Right around the time I was like almost 21, like 19, 20, like it was right around there when I started to notice, because like, I mean, I'm from like in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, like all the way next to like Lake Superior. And, it's just kind of a big drinking culture up there, and northern Wisconsin's kind of the same way. And I just noticed that I was more like kind of extreme than even my friends, and so like there was people that would always be like drunk and stuff. Like the bars, I mean, you go up there into bars and people are pretty sloppy, just because it's more tolerated than like if you go to a place in Tampa. But I noticed like I was even kind of an outcast to even like that area, and so I just know that like it was something that always happened. Like every time I would go out and drinking, I was just always the one who was like in really bad shape by the end of the night. And
Even that young?
Yeah, almost from probably the first couple times.
Okay, well, that was what I was going to ask you next. Like when did you start drinking? When did you start drinking regularly? How old were you?
I think my first time was like, I mean, like the first time I had a beer was probably like 10 or something. But like the first time I really got drunk, it was the beginning of 9th grade.
Okay.
It was actually right before a school function. It was like a school dance. I can remember the night almost to the T, incredibly, after all these years. But that was probably the first time. And then I was so young. I was, 14, 15 at that point. And so it wasn't like you had regular access to it. You know, you had to figure out ways to get it. So by the time I was like 16, 17, that's where like I just had people I knew who were old enough to get it, or people who had fake IDs. And we drank almost every other weekend and
so that's interesting. So you're already like 19, 20, 21. You're already thinking, I do this differently.
Yeah.
And I talk about that in my story too, where I feel like the things that I noticed when I first started to realize I had an issue, the things I noticed were kind of odd, right? But it's exactly kind of what you're saying, in that I just knew I did it differently than my friends. I knew I was more attached to it than my friends. You know, like I wanted to spend more time with alcohol than my friends did. Like I just knew that my relationship with it was different.
And I know that too. And so it was leading up to college. So this has been going on for quite a few years of pretty heavy drinking for somebody who's not even 21 yet. But I just knew like I didn't want to go down this road like permanently. And so that's kind of when I started looking into the military, and I got out of college because it was kind of feeling the problem, because I was just so all over the place in college, you know, like no idea what to do, majors switching every semester.
Right.
So I went into the service, and for a while I was doing pretty good, because the pipeline that I went through is it's like a year long of just like constant time in the field training and stuff. So you really don't have an incredible amount of time to go out.
Right.
You might have like one weekend a month, which we all did go out those one weekends, but it eased off like for about that entire year because I was so focused on my like career versus like the drinking and partying. But once that kind of ended, it all kind of started coming back again, because once I became good at what I did, it didn't really matter. Like I didn't need to practice doing it anymore.
Right.
So once I could teach like all the subjects and like do all the field work relatively easy, it didn't matter if I drank on weekends. I had no preparation. I could teach like the course basically off the cuff for the most part.
It sounds like too, you already had that sort of inner, I don't even know what to call it. Like obviously you have an inner something that is driven, and that is kind of extreme, right? With ultra marathons, even with drinking, that's another extreme, alcoholism. But military too. Yeah. Like there is a certain level of dedication and commitment it takes to do that. So you already had that before you were doing ultra marathons. You already had that thing in place.
Yeah, and the career that I picked, It's got a really high like attrition rate. It's like 80% by the end of it, where most of those people fail. It's very extreme. Like you'll do like maybe 10 to 14 days like out in the field doing under survival conditions, like training to be able to teach people this stuff. And you kind of develop this really tight like culture with everyone around you. But at the same time, it was like a double-edged sword because everyone's so similar. If you like meet any of my friends that were in that career field, we all kind of have similar stories. Like college didn't work out. We wanted to do something extreme. We picked this career because it looked like something really hard. And so it kind of fueled like once we all graduated and everyone was good with their training and being able to teach and stuff, we all kind of partied together because we were all so like similar.
Yeah, right.
People used to say they meet like 30 of us and they're like, you're all the same guy.
Right.
So it didn't help for a long time, and throughout most of my career, it actually just got worse by the end of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was your final thing that made you quit drinking?
I tried for a long time. I would say for like a good 3 years, like I would make it a couple weeks to a month and then go like 2 months. And then it just it was back and forth. But after my last relationship ended, which was like 4 years long, I kind of got out of control for a little bit. But then I started dating somebody new and I saw myself like doing all the things that I did that ruined my last relationship. And like one day it really just came to me, like just taking like an honest look in the mirror and being like, what are you doing? Like, you're going to ruin this too. And that's what it was. And really the big one was when I started to hide how much I was able to drink again. Like that's when I met somebody new and it was like, let's go have a couple glasses of wine, and we would. And then somehow magically I would like find a way to drink way more than the other person even had an idea.
Right.
So
that's pretty good, though. You didn't have any major crisis or, like my rock bottom moment was frightening. It was pretty horrific. I always feel gratitude for people that don't have to have those experiences, though. You know what I mean? Like when you have the wherewithal to see like this is an issue, I need to do something about it without like burning your life to the ground. I think that's fantastic.
Well, and I mean, I did like some of it did happen to me. Like when I was younger, I went to jail because of it, for like not jail, but like I got a ticket for being in possession as an underage person. And then I've gotten in trouble with it a couple times. One was accidentally going into the wrong apartment, and then another one was a driving infraction. And so like those didn't scare me. That was like the part that like bothered me about it was, even though I got in like legal trouble with it, it never stopped me like for the longest time.
I was the same way. It didn't, like, I continued to compound my legal issues because I continued to drink. So I just made them worse and worse and worse. Mm-hmm. But it was never a motivator for me to stop.
Right.
Like I don't know how far I would have gone. But like I meet people all the time who, like I just had somebody on the podcast not very long ago who literally was on probation for 10 years. You know what I mean? Like that's crazy. Yeah. And that would have been my story, I'm sure, if I wouldn't have had my, final moment. But yeah, it wasn't, I don't know, legal trouble was uncomfortable and it sucked, but it was not enough to really make me stop. However, I would say at the same time that like having those consequences and having to jump through all the hoops of the legal system definitely made me uncomfortable.
Right.
And I think that's necessary. I think that's necessary. Like you have to have those things because that's the only way you're going to have any self-awareness is if you get really uncomfortable, you're really in pain. That's the only time that we stop and kind of look at stuff and go, maybe I should make a change.
Yeah. And I mean, I have my own like reservations about how things are handled as far as like in the legal system. It's like probation and stuff. Like I get it. It's part of it. But like, at least for me, and I'm not saying it's for everyone, but I noticed that like part of my drinking was not so much the drinking itself. It was like a lot of underlying issues I wasn't dealing with.
Oh yeah, of course.
And so like going on probation or something, it just, all you gotta do is watch your behavior for a few years and just kind of keep it under check. But it never really solves like the underneath problem that's causing it all. I
think for non-addicted people, it probably helps, right? Because
Right, yeah.
if you're not addicted and you have like the one time that you actually get a DUI or something, if you're not an alcoholic, you're going to stop at that point. You're going to be
Right,
like, oh my
yeah.
gosh, I will never do that again. And that's going to be the end of
Yeah.
it. It's only, a good hardcore drunk like myself that will, that will ride that out as long as possible,
Yeah, and like when I did get in like the couple legal like issues, like I was like, okay, that's it, But it would stop for like a couple weeks or maybe a month,
Right.
And then you would like I'd kind of slide back into it slowly, and it didn't help that the first couple times I tried, I didn't really have much of a support structure around me. I was in like a bad relationship, and it kind of fueled it. Like we both had our issues. Like mine was drinking, hers was gambling, and we kind of like used them
right.
against each other. So like I knew if I could get her to gamble, she would let me drink, and she knew if she could get me to
Right.
drink, I'd let her gamble, and then kind of fed off each other in that way, which was just disastrous
Right.
in the long term. But so the first couple of times it just didn't work. Like I would make it like a month or so and just kind of slide back into it.
Yeah. When you did decide to really quit and get sober, what did you do? Like, what was your method? Did you go to AA? Did you do something else? Did you go to treatment?
I didn't go to AA or like any specific like addiction program. I started seeing like an actual like counselor and stuff just to kind of talk about issues and whatnot. And then to make it through the first 30 days, I decided that I was going to run a 5K every morning for 30 days straight. And so I did it. I did it like 31 or 2 days for the entire month.
Wow.
And it was something that I would do just to make sure like I wasn't out the night before or something, just always knowing that the next day you have to get up and run for a few miles. And so after like the first 30, it just kind of like clicked after that. It didn't seem worth it to go back.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to explain it, but
No, I love that because I always say there was some point for me. For me, it was at 2 weeks, literally 14 days, that I had this moment where it clicked, where I wanted to protect my sobriety.
yeah.
It
Right.
became really important to me and I wanted to take care of it,
Yeah, and I think it was the same way with me. It became like a pillar of my like personality now, where before like I was like fun to party with and like kind of extreme.
Yeah.
But now like, and actually the longer that I'm away from it, the less appealing it seems.
For sure. Yes, I
Because
agree.
like before now, I can't think of a time in my life I ever went to a bar sober and sat there for more than 10 minutes without ordering a drink or something. But I've gone out with like my new girlfriend, and it's hard to even like watch people like, oh, I remember exactly how that feels.
Yes.
And you're like, it's like almost like, oh, I don't want to be like that anymore.
Yes.
It just reminds you of everything that
Yeah.
you're not.
I was a bartender for most of my adult life, and I continued bartending into my sobriety, partially because it was the only thing I'd ever done. It was the only job I ever had. It's the only thing I knew how to do. I didn't have any education. Like
Right.
I was lost, but I was the same way. Like for me, it was motivation, and where a lot of my, not a lot, but every once in a while in AA, somebody would bring it up like, oh, that's not a good idea, or something. And I always thought, for me, it's more motivation than it is a trigger. Like it doesn't trigger me at all. It's like, it's more like I see these people drunk at the end of the night and they're so gross. And you get to
Yeah.
see people go from sober to drunk and it's so gross.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that drunk behavior. And I was always like, I would always walk out of work with this enormous sense of gratitude that was not my life anymore. Because I love to think that I wasn't drunk and gross.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah, right. But I'm pretty sure I was. So yeah, it was always a motivator to me. And I was like, oh, thank God I'm not like that anymore. Thank God that's not a part of my life anymore. And I get to be somebody different now. Like I just did not want to drink.
Yeah, and recently one of the specific incidents that I saw that was like, to me, was like almost appalling, and it wasn't so much because of the person, it was because I've been that exact same person. Is I was on the trolley ride here in Tampa, and there was a a couple that walked on, and just as soon as they walked on, I could just tell by the way that this man looked that he was like beyond hammered. And like they sat down and they started getting into like this argument and making no sense. And I was just like, oh, this is gonna explode on this trolley and there's nowhere to go.
Right.
Like
there's no escape for anyone.
I was like, and like you just have to hear it too. Like there's no point of trying to like talk to somebody who's in that condition, because most likely it's just going to make them angry or whatnot. And
because there's no reasoning with someone who's not in their right mind.
Right.
Yeah. There's no rationale.
And then I remember we got off the trolley and I was just like, that reminds me exactly of times where I've been like that, where he wanted to continue is really what was going on. And she didn't want him to, which good for her that she was stopping it, but,
or trying to,
yeah. And I was just like, I've been there where like, no matter what someone says you, like they can't stop you from like continuing to go out and keep going until like you physically can't go anymore. So I've been there.
So how long have you been sober now?
6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And what are your what are the things you have found for yourself that keep you on a good track?
Well, the racing is one of them. That's kind of been like a big part of like my like life, like physical, like just fitness in general. It's always helped me like maintain some sort of schedule and standard for the weeks. School is another big one. Almost finished my master's, and I just always took education like after the military, not before, but after the military, I took my education like pretty seriously. So that's another big thing I do. And then the counseling helps because it's just, talking about like other issues that might be stressing you out, and then you can kind of deal with them, and then you don't deal with it in unhealthy ways. And then just having like, my family and friends and stuff have just said they're like, you look healthier, you just seem happier, like all that stuff. So it all kind of just helps. Yeah,
I was going to ask that too. Like, is your family supportive? Like, do they understand?
They kind of seem to like want to downplay it a little bit, like almost make it seem like it's not as big of an issue as it is. And
that's really common.
Yeah.
That's really common. Unless there are other people in your family with addiction issues.
There is.
Sometimes if there are other people, then families get it a little bit more. But it is a really common story that loved ones, not even just family, but even close friends and stuff, will kind of downplay it because they just don't get it. And they don't get that, like, I can't ever have a drink. If I have one, the circus starts all over again.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's more the challenge where people, non-addicted people, think if you go a certain period of time abstinent and you don't have any drinks, then you could probably control it now.
Yeah. And
that's definitely not the case for me.
That's not really for me either. Like I could probably make it like 1 or 2 times where
yes,
like
I always say that. Yes.
I might be able to hang and just be like,
I might be able to not completely lose my mind.
Yeah.
But a time or two.
But I would say after like 2 or 3 times, it would go back. And then if I was ever to like actually drink to the point of getting drunk again, it would really start over.
Yeah, for sure.
That was like the friend thing was like a hard part of it too, because a lot of my friends were very like instigating with it, and I don't have most of those friends anymore because they really weren't friends. They're more just like drinking friends.
Yeah. And
so like only like the core of my friend circle is left, because once I stopped like going out and visiting friends to go drinking for weeks, like we'd go, I might drive to another state and visit them for a week. Like once I stopped doing that stuff, the invites stop, and you start to slowly shrink your friend circle down to the people who understand.
Right. Well, I surrounded myself with people that drank like I did.
Yeah.
So when I wasn't doing that anymore, obviously I didn't have the expectation that all those people stopped too, but it's like our lives just went totally opposite directions at that point. Right. So was it sad? I wasn't even really that sad, but it didn't bother me so much because I went to AA. So I like had people, right out the gate. I had people I could talk to and people I identified with and people to have coffee with and all that stuff. So I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. And I love those people. I loved all my drinking friends. I still love them to this day. I think they're all still drunk. God bless them. But yeah, it's just that then like our reason for being or our purpose in life and the one thing that bonded us together was no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
So we went different directions. But I don't think they dislike me, and I certainly don't dislike them. I just, once I wasn't sitting on a bar stool for 10 hours a day, all of a sudden it wasn't fun to hang out anymore.
Yeah, and that's like what I was just saying, like the invites stopped happening, because for like a few years after I got out of the service, I would still visit friends. Like I would go up to like where they were stationed and I would hang out for the weekend or go to like another guy's house and stay there for a weekend and whatnot. But the invites started kind of like becoming less and less frequent because that was like one of the first things I kind of cut off before I even like fully stopped, is I kind of stopped going like away to like places and drinking, because it's like once I was with them it was even worse than it was.
Sure.
Like if I was with like my friends and stuff here, I was able to maintain a little bit better, but when I was like with them, it was like a free for all. Like just
Right.
No one cared. And so they didn't care that we would drink till all hours of the night and then wake up and like start again almost within like a few hours of waking up, and you're already like at it again. And so like I cut that off like well before I even really stopped drinking. Like, and then eventually it just became to the point where it just, no matter what I did, it just became a problem.
Yeah.
And just, there was no way around it.
No matter what city I was in,
Yeah.
it was definitely a problem. What has been your most challenging time in your sobriety, like the hardest moment of your sobriety, and how did you get through it and stay sober?
The hardest time was actually, I think, around when I went to visit like family for the holidays. And it wasn't so much like anyone was encouraging me to drink, because they were good about that. But it was just like, I would see everyone doing it and like everyone's like having fun and feeling relaxed. And I'm like sitting here like kind of uptight about it, because it's like, it's still kind of fresh at that point. And you're trying to like not give in to like yourself's peer pressure. You're like, oh man, I just have one with my family and
Right.
it'll be cool. Like they know. And so like, it was really difficult not to just like start again.
Yeah.
And so I just tried the best I could to remember like why I was doing it and the reasons I was staying away from it. And it helped that they know, because that was like a big part of it, that like, hey, he doesn't want to drink while he's home and that type of stuff. Because years prior, it was like, once again, my family, I wouldn't say my whole family, my mom's pretty like to the point where she might only have like maybe a few beers a year now. But like my siblings and stuff, our thing used to be like, we'd always go home for the holidays and everyone just go out the whole time. Like the whole family would,
Right.
we'd have like events where the family would all get together and everyone would drink and then like, and stuff like that. So it was just kind of difficult, like being there with and not being part of that anymore.
Yeah. Did you feel like you didn't fit in?
A little bit, because like when everyone else is like able to control it and they're able to have fun but know like their limits and like stop and behave and be a productive person in life.
Yeah, right.
You're kind of like, why am I the outcast here?
Yeah.
And
I had one of those moments, and oddly enough, it was way into my sobriety because it was only maybe 2 or 3 years ago, holidays also. And Christmas for me at my mom's is very small, right? It's really mostly just our immediate families, me, my brothers, their wives, whatever. And it's really nice. It's a time I really look forward to, just connecting with everybody. But I'm the only sober person, I mean, my mom doesn't drink, but she's not alcoholic. She doesn't drink. But there was a moment, and I think it was 3 years ago, and I was sitting in the living room at my mom's, and, some of my family, my brothers were like mixing shots and doing, they were just having this moment. And it wasn't even, I think, so much about drinking. It just happened that drinking was what they were doing in that moment. But it was, I felt left out. I felt like they were doing this thing and they were connecting and bonding, and I was excluded because I couldn't do that thing, and it was just a moment. It wasn't, I didn't get super upset about it, but it did. It was like, kind of bummed me out. I was 10 years sober,
Yeah, and I think that's like the thing that it's real similar, because like when I was thinking about too, it's like you see everyone having fun and it does look like everyone's legitimately enjoying themselves. And
well, and they probably are. The problem is that sometimes I can be a little too much fun.
Right.
I take fun to a whole other extreme.
Yeah.
To where it's not fun anymore for anyone.
It was just really, it was just difficult at that point. But I had a lot of fun not doing it too, because I did a lot of things when I was home that I never used to do.
Yeah.
I didn't go sightseeing with like my parents, or like I didn't go and do like homemade cooking and stuff like that, because we were all just out partying like the whole time.
Right.
And so it was fun to do a lot of stuff I didn't normally do. And then even at the end, my mom was like, that was a really enjoyable trip because you were actually here the whole time. Like you're actually in the house, like hanging out and like not gone with friends and whatnot.
Yeah, I used to stay the absolute shortest time possible with my family. Especially like when I lived in Los Angeles and I would come back for Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever. It's like I would do the bare minimum, and then I was always bailing out to go hang out and drink with my friends, It's kind of awful. But you had gratitude that you didn't drink, and I love that that's kind of how it ended, was in that happiness that you didn't drink, because that's the important part.
Right. I definitely think like I know my mom for sure is like pretty happy with how things are going, because I'm the only one who doesn't live there. My entire family all lives like within 5-6 miles of each other. I'm the only one who lives down here. So she was always kind of just like worried anyway, because I was like the only one with no family oversight.
Right.
And so
no supervision.
No supervision. Just in Tampa all alone. So I think she's definitely like excited that things are starting to get better on that front. I've always been good at everything else, it's kind of like a very dichotomous thing.
That's a very common story too, with alcoholics.
Yeah, it's like really good student, really good in the service, but just always had like this really bad attachment with it.
So now I talk about how kind of being an addicted person, right? Like my compulsions will pop up in all different areas of my life. Like I always have to be mindful, because I am extreme in everything. So I always have to be mindful of all kinds of other stuff, right? Because I will still do everything to an extreme. So I would always catch myself, and I still even now, I'm good at sobriety, right? But when something will come up in another area, it's still so baffling to me, because I'm like, how am I so good in all these things, and I'm so driven, I'm so dedicated, I'm so on top of my game, and then I will have this one area that like it's just got me, and for me the last few years it's been like food and sugar. Those have been my battles, and it just blows my mind. I'm like, how am I so on top? I'm so controlled, and I'm so committed to everything I do, but man, I cannot get a grip on this one thing,
Yeah, I definitely get it too. And I mean, I'm the same way with like a lot of the stuff I do. I do enjoy racing and stuff like that, but I've always like kind of slightly eased off, because I'm afraid that if I just ditch like everything and just focus solely on like running and like doing that type of stuff, I'll look back like 10 years later and be like, well, you're basically just addicted to that, and you don't you did nothing else besides that for 10 years. And I've read some books about runners who kind of have like some of that same like notice that same thing, where like after they do that for so many years and they're like very successful at it, and they look back and they're like, I didn't do a whole lot besides that.
Right.
Like I didn't have a whole lot of other aspects in my life.
I would think that would be true with all sort of top level athletes. You know what I mean? NBA players, NFL players, like that is kind of your existence.
Right.
Like you're training, working out, preparing, like that's kind of your whole existence, I did many, many years ago, in the beginning of my intervention career, I did an intervention on girls, probably one of the most challenging cases I've ever had. And she'd been a ballerina her whole entire life from the time she was itty bitty. And I think she was 21 or 22, something like that. And she had an injury and she could never dance again. And the repercussions of that injury for her mentally and emotionally was unbearable, because it's all she had ever done.
Right.
Her whole life, like so many hours every day were dedicated to that. It was her whole existence. And all of a sudden she's looking at the rest of her life, like, who am I? What do I do? I've never done anything else. So I think in any top performing athleticism, I think it would have to be that way. I would imagine doing an ultra marathon is not easy.
It's very strange because when you run a regular marathon, the goal of like a marathon is to run the entire time and like not stop and run the full 26 miles. With these longer races, generally 50 miles and above, it's actually like encouraged that you have some sort of strategy to how you're going to finish this. So you'll like, well, I mean, like the real top, like 5%, they actually run the full 100. Like, I don't even know how they do it, but majority of everybody else who does them, they integrate like walking and strategies into there. So it's not so much like you don't have to be in like top physical shape. Like you don't have to have like a VO2 max off the charts or anything like that, where like an Olympic sprinter or marathoner would. You really just have to have like the mental like toughness to just deal with like all the pain and stuff through the whole night. And that's where a lot of people have issues is one, it's a little anticlimactic because you run for 23 hours and do this race and you finish and then you're kind of like, well, what's next?
Yeah, you're just finished.
You're finished.
Yeah.
And it's not like you get money. It's not like you get really any recognition because it's kind of a niche sport anyway. But I always liked it because when you're out there on the course and you're 7, 8, 9, 10 hours into this race, you kind of start forgetting about everything else that really is part of your daily life because you're not thinking about like your bank statements. You're not thinking about partying. You're not thinking about any of that stuff because you're so focused in trying to like deal with like the pain from running that long, making sure you're hydrated, having enough calories, all that stuff. So it's like you're very focused like in the few moments that are in front of you, and you do it for hours and hours and hours till you finally finish the race. And I've told a bunch of people since I've done him, they're like, why do you do it? And I was like, for the next few weeks after the race, it's like someone turned like the volume on life down just a tad. Like you just went through something so physically and mentally exhausting that things are just easier to deal with for the next few days.
Right. Like it puts things in perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
Because like you'll be in traffic.
That's interesting.
You'll be in traffic. You're like, oh, well, at least it's not hour 18 and I'm throwing up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you get like crazy blisters? And I mean, what does your life look like when you finish running 23 hours and I assume you probably sleep really well that night because you're exhausted. But what does it look like? What are the repercussions, like physically?
Some people, it does take them a long time. I don't know what I was gifted with as far as like my ability to recover from things, but it was part of what helped me through the military training and stuff like that is I could always, as I remember, could get beat up like really physically bad, but be in pretty good shape within a couple of days to still like perform. For me, about 3 days after the race is when like the soreness starts to like fall off.
Yeah.
And within a week, I'm usually running again.
Are your feet all blistered up?
No, I don't get any. I'm lucky. I don't know how. Like I said, I don't know how that this works. The only thing I ever do is my toenails will get bruised. Most of them, except for the two big ones, always seem to be there. But all the small ones are gone. But usually for me, it's just a lot of really, really deep soreness for a few days. So like going to the bathroom and sitting down and standing up and stuff, it's just difficult. But it's kind of like when you have a really bad hangover, if you sit around all day, it's just worse.
Yes.
So if you get up and move around and work the soreness out of your muscles and your legs, it tends to go away faster.
Yeah.
And
it's same thing, even like when I switch my workout at the gym or something, when I switch a workout, I'm always super sore because I'm doing stuff differently. And the next day I'll kind of be hating life, but I will always go like get on the treadmill.
Right.
Just kind of walk it out, keep the muscles warm, like you have to do that. Or you're right. If you just lay around and think about how badly it hurts, it's just going to hurt more.
Exactly. And physically, like, I mean, there's some people that like they legitimately have some serious problems when they finish these. Like, I've seen people where their feet are, I mean, it looks like they dipped them in lava. Like they're just filled with blisters everywhere.
That's what I've seen.
Yeah. And I'm assuming the reason my feet are pretty strong, a lot of it has to do with probably wearing boots and being in field conditions for so many years in the service that my like feet just got calloused over time. So they don't really get beat up. But my main thing that just affects me the next couple of days is just like my GI stuff is just all messed up from like just drinking all this like these Gatorades and all that race fuel and stuff. Like you just feel like bloated and stuff for days and just like you're not eating right, and sleeping is always a little difficult because you're like crampy and sore and whatnot. But I love it.
So last question, my favorite question. What is your favorite thing about being a sober person?
I would say my favorite thing about being sober is probably the fact that I can predict like how I'm going to feel like the next day and stuff like that is really what it comes down to. When I was drinking, like being hungover, like sometimes you'll have hangovers you can deal with. Sometimes they're unpredictable. Sometimes you're really emotional. Sometimes you're anxiety driven because of your hangovers, but for the most part I can predict how I'm going to feel the next couple of days, and then it's just life in general has just become more like predictable and easier to control, and
more stable.
That's really what it comes down to, just better stability across like all realms of everything. I love that. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming and taking the time to do this with me. It's awesome to meet you. I love that you do ultra marathons. I will never do something like that. Well, thank you for having me here. This was really fun. I really enjoyed it. Good. Thanks so much. And for you guys, listeners, we will see you next week.
You've reached the end of another great episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Candid and honest conversation about addiction and recovery. Be sure to visit us at addictionunlimited.com to join the conversation and access show notes and links to everything we talked about. Love this episode? Please take 30 seconds to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes to help us improve and give you the information you want. Thanks for listening. See you next week.